All right, so this chapter is all about consumer protection and the various places that you can go to in order to make sure that you guys are protected in terms of your rights as a consumer. So there are a number of bills of rights, let's say, that have been established to make sure that you are protected for a lot of different places, like, for instance, as a consumer or as an airline, or in terms of technology, or in terms of your rights as a patient. So the basic idea behind these bills of rights is to protect you against unfair practices that happen within those various industries. So for the consumer, it would protect you broadly for safety and being informed about what happens with the product, the right to be able to choose what kind of product you're going to get, and the right to be heard when you have a complaint and be able to make that complaint known through a redress of change of some kind to the product itself or to a law. And then the right to consumer education to know more about your product. In the airline industry, it really refers to the idea that you would be able to make a reservation and it would be confirmed, that you'd be able to get refunds when necessary, and then be notified of delays and cancellations and be compensated for what happens there. In terms of technology, you have the right of time shifting and space shifting. So time shifting really is this idea that you can record things and then watch them back later. This was first brought up to people through the use of VCRs. The various industries wanted to prevent people from being able to record TV, but you are now able to do that. And because of that, it allows for services like DVR. And then space shifting is being able to take something that you own in one medium and transfer it to another. So this is why you're able to take things off of a CD and then put them into an MP3. You're able to shift them. Or the fact that you're able to generally create backup copies of technology or media that you own. And there's right to make a choice about where you're going to watch those things. So platform choice. So you have a choice between all the different various streaming services, for example. And this idea that things can be easily translated from one medium to another. So when technology goes, you should be able to take it from one version of that technology and transfer it somewhere else. In terms of your right as a patient, you have the right to have information disclosure, a choice of who you're going to use as a provider for insurance, access to emergency services, and treatment decisions about what kind of treatment you're going to allow. For instance, some people don't want to be resuscitated, they don't want to be on a ventilator, they have different things about what they would like to have in their end-of-life treatment or anything that happened to them in a catastrophic event. And then respect and non-discrimination and confidentiality of all of the things you talk about, that you can't give that information out to people that aren't a part of your family or connected in some way to you, that you've allowed for them to get that information unless you've authorized it. And there are consumer protection laws that have been passed that aren't just like bills of rights, but rather like laws that back up those bills of rights. Things like the Food and Drug and Cosmetic Act, the Flammable Fabrics Act, the Meat Inspection Act. These are all acts that try to make it so that way those kinds of products are protected, that you don't get adulterated meat, for example, or that if there's a problem with one of the substances that you have that you're taking as a drug of some kind, that it can be recalled, which is basically a way to get that product back, a defective product, back from the consumers and brought in for refund or repair in the end. And then there's also laws in regards to medicine that make it so that way you can have generic drugs that can be used when brand name drugs are past their patent. They allow for the compound to be used in a generic form, which usually means that other companies can now come in and make those products at a much lower cost. And then a whole slew of other protection laws that have been created that help everything from making sure that things are labeled properly with warning labels for cigarettes, and protecting national traffic and motor vehicle safety, and toys, and labeling on packaging to make sure it represents what's actually inside, ingredients and things like that. Care labels that explain to you how you're supposed to wash your clothes, and explain to you correctly. Toy safety, Nutrition and Labeling Education Act, which makes it so that you know how many grams of sodium or how many vitamins or how much saturated fat and calories that are on there. That's all there because of Nutrition Labeling and Education Act. And then Children's Online Privacy Protection Act and FERPA. These are two acts that make it so that way schools and families can feel as if their privacy is protected. And then finally, we've got, in terms of consumer protection laws, HIPAA laws. HIPAA basically is the law that protects you when you're at the medical doctor's office. So that way your information is kept secure and safe. And we talked a little about some of these other ones as well. Federal agencies. There are a number of federal agencies that actually ensure that these laws are being enforced. So they have the USDA, which is the part of the Department of Agriculture, so it's the United States Department of Agriculture, which protects the food supply, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which protects technology, the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, which is a part of that whole idea of getting things labeled correctly. They're the ones that make sure that that law is being enforced. The Consumer Product Safety Commission, which protect you from any kind of really hazardous hazard that can come to you from using a particular consumer product, from potentially getting hurt or dying from it. And then you've got the FCC and the FTC. So the FCC, which is the Federal Communication Commission, regulates communication. So that's radio, internet, television, telephone, all those things relate to that. And then the Federal Trade Commission is about making sure that there isn't monopolies that are being formed. So they regulate trade. And the last couple ones here, we've got the U.S. Postal Inspection Service to make sure there's no mail fraud. And then the FAA, which makes sure that that it's basically about airplanes flying in space and making sure that they are operating properly, not crashing into one another, and not out of regulation, and not out of the regulations that are created by Congress when it comes to these agencies. And then finally, the Security and Exchange Commission, whose purpose is to protect and make sure that stocks are, and companies that have stocks on the stock market, are properly and fairly and correctly representing what kinds of earnings they're earning from quarter to quarter, so that way you know you are investing in a stock that is actually truly doing well as a company. So that came out of the Great Depression, actually. And then there are state and local agencies, and then also there are agencies that help protect you as a private organization that aren't a part of the government. So state and local agencies would be any kind of agency that happens at the state level. It could be something happens at the state level or the county or the city level that protect you from all these kinds of frauds that could take place. And then finally, we have private organizations, businesses, or rather organizations that have been created for the purpose of protecting consumers. So there is a company called the Better Business Bureau, and what it does is it makes sure that it gives accurate information about businesses and whether or not they're operating appropriately. In fact, if you have a problem with a business, you can call the BBB to make sure that they are being notified. And if you are looking for a company that to work with, you can make sure and check them out with the BBB, see if they're on the up and up. And then we have the Major Appliance Consumer Action Panel, which tries to protect people in terms of the appliance industry. You have private citizens who act as consumer advocates to make sure that people's rights are being protected. The National Consumer League is started in 1992, which was to establish an operation that would protect people against fraud generally. And then we have the Federal Citizens Information Center, the FCIC. It assists federal agencies in the development and promotion and distribution of practical consumer publications. So things that you can read to learn about how the different products work and to protect you as a consumer. And then finally, the Consumers Union. It's the largest consumer testing facility in the world and produces test results and product ratings. And they put out a report in a magazine called Consumer Reports. It's a great place to find out whether or not the product that you're trying to get is of the best quality. They rate everything from cars to televisions to cooking products. If you're looking for understanding whether or not your snowblower that you wanted to buy is of the best quality, you can go on the Consumer Reports website and find out more about that. They are a non-profit organization, but you still have to pay for access to that information, but it's highly tested products that they really put through the ringer, and it really kind of shows you what kind of products to pick. Often I use that. Like, for instance, when I was looking for a car, I checked on the Consumer's Report and found out about the company that I was going to buy the car from was reputable, and that they had good consumer product ratings. Like, not just a month later, but a year later, people felt that the car was still useful to them. So hope that you guys are protected out there. You have all kinds of agencies at the local, state, and national level, and then you also have private organizations that help you to make sure that all of these agencies are doing their job, and to make sure the laws are being written with consumers in mind.